Take two. Hopefully the lighting won't crap out on me and next door's dogs won't lose their ever-loving minds. Because that's what happened when I tried to film this the first time. Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you guys about journals. How I've used them as an actor, as a freelancer, as an artist to improve my life, my work, my time management, and how they could potentially help you if you are an actor as well, or you're training to be an actor, or if you're just interested in the kind of tools that I found really helpful for me. Journals are really useful and really versatile tools. You can use them for so many different things depending on the type of journal, how you choose to use that journal, and what your aims are. They can be physical, that's how I prefer to journal. They can be digital, you can journal daily, you can journal just as and when you need it, and everything in between. I think a lot of people go into journaling in whatever form that takes with the idea that there are strict rules, like you have to do it every day or you have to be writing about these different things. And what I've discovered more and more, especially in the last few weeks and months, is that they're a tool for you to use to make your life better in however way that's gonna work best for you. And with all of the journals that I have either kept for a very long time or the journals that I'm starting to get back into, that's really been the game changer for me, is how versatile it is and how it's a tool for you to use rather than there being a right or wrong way to journal. There's a lot of content that tells you there's a right and wrong way to journal, and whilst that can be helpful if you're looking for a place to start, at the end of the day you can journal how you want. I've used journaling at various stages of my life. I think, like most people, the first thing that you could call a journal I kept when I was probably about 10, 11. And particularly as an adult, different types of journals have been really useful tools for me, not only as a freelance professional, but also as a creative. And yeah, that's why I want to share them with you today. So here are 5 journals that I either use at the moment or have used in the past and are looking to get back into, that I think have been really helpful in my personal and career and artistic development. And especially if you're a performer, the last journal might be one that you haven't heard of before, but I think would really take your performance practice to the next level, shall we say. Let's get into it. Woo! Journals! I don't know why I did that. Journal number 1 is my bullet journal. This is my current bullet journal. She's so pretty, she's so berry red. I started bullet journaling in 2019. I was in a Christmas show, kind of 2018 to 2019, and one of my cast members told me about bullet journaling, started it the calendar year of 2019, and I have not looked back. 5 years, going strong. And also, if you are a long-time watcher of my channel, slash if you just want to go back and watch them because they're still up, during COVID, I used to make monthly plan with me's with my bullet journal. If you look back at those old plan with me's, you'll see that they were kind of your typical bullet journal YouTube fare of, you know, elaborate artistic monthly spreads. I don't do that anymore. There's gonna be some B-roll, but in case the B-roll turned out rubbish, so you can see, like, this is a typical like weekly spread. It's literally, I keep it very simple. I pick a color for the month. My kind of monthly setup with my calendar is the same every single month, the same spreads. And then each week I just have tasks for the week at the top, and then Monday, right, Tuesday, right, Wednesday, right, all the way through. It's very simple because life is busy. We're not stuck in our houses, and I don't have time to draw lots of pretty pictures. In COVID, I loved doing the pretty pictures. It was a great artistic outlet for me. Now, we just need it to be functional and practical, and that's okay. If you don't know what bullet journaling is, how does one describe bullet journaling? Bullet journaling is an organizational tool. So the reason it's called bullet journaling is that you have different types of bullet points for different types of notes that you're writing. So like a dot will be a task that you need to do, a cross will be when that task is completed, a dash is just for general notes, observations, things you want to write down. An open circle is an event, so like, I don't know, I use it for things like appointments, auditions, parties, things like that. And then you have different types of logs. So in like the most kind of simple type of bullet journaling, you have your futures log, which is like a year overview, your monthly logs, which are like the month overview, your weekly logs, which is the week overview, and then your daily logs, which is what's happening in the day. That's the simplest form of bullet journaling, is just you have your futures, monthlies, weeklies, and dailies, and then you migrate tasks, events, or whatever as and when. And yeah, and then from there, like, the world's your oyster. I use my bullet journal for three main things. Firstly, it is as an organizational tool. It's like my diary, my agenda. It's where I write everything down that is happening in my life, so I know what's going on. I use it to track and register anything that I'm tracking, any habits that I want to maintain. I have a mood tracker. I have some other things like exercise, some medical things as well that I track in my bullet journal. And thirdly, I use it as my gratitude and positives log, which can be a separate journal in itself, kind of bonus journal, but I like to keep it in my bullet journal. So every day I write down 3 positive things that's happened in that day and 1 thing I'm grateful for every day. And I like keeping that in my bullet journal because it's also kind of an overview of what happened that day as well, which is nice. Kind of a secondary thing with my bullet journal since about, I can't remember when I started doing this. Definitely since 2021. It might have even started sometime during 2020, is I use it to maintain my Spanish. I kind of speak Spanish. It's like totally on the back burner. I haven't spoken in like over a year, but yeah. I kind of speak Spanish, and so I do my bullet journal in Spanish. All of my spreads are in Spanish. Anything that I write on a regular basis is in Spanish. The only things that wouldn't is if I'm having to write down something really quickly and I don't know how to say it in Spanish, but it needs to get down. Or like I have a brain dump spread every month. So if I'm trying to like figure stuff out, then obviously I'll do that in English so that I can properly like get my thoughts on paper. But other than that, like, everything's in Spanish. Obviously that's not a requirement. You can just have a bullet journal in your own language. The reason I find bullet journaling so helpful for me as a freelancer, where like week to week, month to month, my life looks very different depending on what I'm doing, is that bullet journaling is so flexible because you make your spreads every week or every month or whatever. You can really tailor it to what you need that day, that week, that month, even that year. I don't know where my 2020 bullet journal is. I wasn't able to find it for the B-roll and stuff, but I'm pretty sure if I were to look at it, like January and February would have been like one thing, and then as soon as March, April roll around, I'm pretty sure you would probably see a massive change, because obviously in March, everything got turned upside down in 2020, and so I could adapt my bullet journal to account for that. Similarly, just in terms of just kind of less worldwide situations examples, but like as an actor, the spreads I need in my bullet journal for when I'm going on tour, for example, are gonna be different from when I'm, you know, at home working my resting job and auditioning. I also like that I can have everything in one place. So like not only can I obviously write down my shifts at my resting job or whatever, but also I can use it to track my auditions. I can use it to track my networking. Like I mentioned before, if I'm on tour, I can write my packing lists. When I've been on tour, I've had spreads noting down like where I'm staying when and what dates and what the address is and how much those digs cost. All of that information can be in one place, rather than if I'm going on tour, for example, having to find a separate notebook or a separate piece of paper to write my packing list. And then if that gets misplaced, then I don't have it with me. Also, you can use your bullet journal as a system for any other type of journaling you want to do. So some people will have like their like kind of emotional diary in bullet journal form. Some people will have practice logs or whatever in here. Like one of I think my 2021 journal, I'm pretty sure I got B-roll of this, when I was starting to learn ukulele properly, I had spreads with like strumming patterns in them, for example. If you're wanting a way to organize and track things like hobbies and interests, bullet journaling could also be a system you can use for that as well. All this to say, I love bullet journaling. In terms of like time management organizational tool, if things like Google Calendar or like just buying a year diary works for you, I don't think you need a bullet journal. Lots of people are like fine just using Google Calendars or whatever, like other online calendars, or just buying a like 2025 year journal and just like using that. And if that works for you, then great. Because the thing is with bullet journaling, even the most Spartan way of doing it, it takes time because you have to organize where your pages and stuff are going. Even if you're not like drawing a spread, if you're just writing things linearly, you still have to be like, this is my future log and this is going to be my monthly log, and what things are going to be helpful for me to make the most of this tool. Whereas with something pre-printed, it's like, this is the tool, I guess I have to work with it. But if those kind of methods of organization don't work for you because your life is very changeable, or for whatever reason, it doesn't just have to be that, you might just not like them, and you're looking for something that you can really personalize to your life and any changes your life might go through, or you want something that is more conducive to having everything in one place, then I would strongly recommend bullet journaling. Also, kind of slight tangent from when I was filming the B-roll, it's also just kind of nice to have a record of what was happening in that year without having to like read through like you going through a terrible breakup or something, I don't know. But like just having a more kind of observational record of what was happening in a particular month or in a particular year, just based on not even just reading through and seeing what happened, but like the kind of spreads that you made up, and also the spreads you used and didn't use. I'm gonna stop talking about bullet journaling, you know I love it. Actually, before I finish off, just some examples of like theatre-based spreads. So if you're an actor, packing lists for when you're on jobs, if you're working away from home or going on tour, audition trackers, networking/submission trackers for submitting to jobs, networking lists, so making lists of people that you want to write to in general in a month, tracking lists of like where you're staying if you're on tour in terms of digs, and then kind of general theatre fan ones, shows you want to see, shows you have seen, songs you want to learn, that's again going more for like a professional thing, but even as an amateur, songs you want to learn, monologues you want to learn, fan arts, if you're going down kind of the more artistic bullet journaling side of things. Each month can have a theme of a different show that you like, or you can just have a spread that is just dedicated to fan art for a specific show. Things like that. Very versatile, and we love it. I'm trying to make sure that I don't get pins and needles in my feet. Journal number 2 is your standard like journal diary, where you just like write down your thoughts and feelings. I've been leaning on this heavily. If you've seen my last video, you'll know why. This is the first type of journal that I ever kept, which I think is the same for most people, you know, when you're kind of writing in a book as if you're writing to a friend. I've kept a journal like this on and off for probably most of my life since being a preteen. Not always, not religiously, I've fallen off and fallen back on. And as an adult, what really kind of got me back into this kind of journaling was through the practice of morning pages, which is from The Artist's Way. I have a review of my thoughts of The Artist's Way, so I'll link that in a card and in the description if you're interested. Basically, morning pages is like a brain dump method of journaling. You just write what's in your head for 3 pages. In recent weeks and months, what I've been finding really helpful is, instead of just having morning pages as a more emotional journaling practice, of expanding it to just like a general diary where I can use journaling prompts, or as I'm writing I can ask myself questions, which I've found really helpful and more constructive in some ways. And I think this is partly my frustration with morning pages, but also something that in the past has not been great for me with this type of journaling. I'll start with morning pages first. With morning pages, I would often find, I still find sometimes, that because you're just writing whatever's in your head, so it's kind of like venting or brain dumping, I would find that I would complain about the same things over and over again and just complain about them. So I'd have half an hour of writing in my morning pages of being like, okay, I'm complaining about the same thing that I always complain about. And that can be things in my life that I'm not happy with, or it can even just be things like I'm complaining about the fact that I'm tired because I'm writing this first thing in the morning and I'm tired, and like that's not helpful for me right now. And I'm aware with morning pages specifically, it's about getting all the fodder out of your head so then you can go and be your best creative self, but especially when you're also needing an outlet for anything emotional that's going on, a brain dump or event isn't always what you need, right? The second thing, kind of going back to what I've found in the past, when I haven't been in a good place mentally or emotionally, when you're just writing about how bad everything is, and you don't know how to do that compassionately, which I think is the key, it can just be like a positive feedback loop of negativity. Like you're just talking about how bad everything is and how bad you are and how everything sucks. And then that just makes you feel like that's more true and gives you less agency sometimes. So I've found recently that if I'm writing in my journal and I notice that I'm writing about something that I don't need to vent about, because sometimes you do need to vent, sometimes you just need to be like, everything's terrible, blah. And that's fine. But when I find myself writing about things where it's like, I don't need to vent about this, I need to like figure my way through this, asking myself questions whilst I'm writing is really, really helpful. And also when I'm wanting to write about things that are difficult, for me, sometimes doing that through a journal prompt is easier because it gives you a way in, especially when I feel like, and there's things that I still need to write about where I'm like, I know I need to write about this, but I don't want to. A prompt can be a better way to do that in terms of, you can keep on coming back to it, so you can kind of keep chipping away through different journaling sessions, or it just gives you an easy in without having to just be like, this thing, do you know what I mean? You can answer a question and it can ease you in. Also, it can be, sometimes you don't know what you need to write about emotionally, and so finding a really evocative prompt can be a really good way of you delving deeper when you don't know what you need to delve deeper into. I actually found that the other day. I'm gonna find the prompt. There's a YouTuber called Kellyanne Maddox who I really enjoy their content. It's kind of more on the woo-woo side, so if you're not into that, then obviously, but she does really good videos about journaling and shadow work, which is like a form of journaling that some people really enjoy. She has I'll link it in the description, she has an old blog with like, I think it's 20 shadow work journaling prompts, which just means like delving into your psyche. And yeah, I did one of them. This was a few days ago, like about, is it the 15th today? Yeah, so 5 days ago. I'm not gonna read my journal entry, but I wrote a response to the prompt, what does it really mean to bloom where you're planted? And so much good stuff came out of that journaling session that I wouldn't have thought about or realized about myself if I just done a brain dump of like, oh, this happened today and blah, 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 and I'm thinking about this. Do you know what I mean? I've found expanding from just morning pages or just brain dumping and just like saying what's in your head or writing what's in your head to using questions I ask myself or journal prompts has been really effective. And I don't always use a prompt. Sometimes I do just spend half an hour just writing what's in my head. I've also given myself more permission to, if I'm not feeling it, like not. So for example, there was a couple of days ago, I started writing in my journal and I was like, I'm not in the headspace to look for a prompt, but just writing randomly is not really helping either. So I'm just gonna stop at the end of this page, and that's okay. And being a bit more flexible and using it as a tool. And I think that's the important thing with this kind of journaling, all of these journals, but particularly this type of journaling, especially if you're worried about, is it actually gonna make me feel worse, is firstly seeing it as a tool for you to make your life better. And secondly, approaching it with compassion. I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. And I think that's the key thing of making sure that this is a positive tool for you rather than a negative tool, is like making sure that you are being compassionate with yourself through the use of your diary or your journal. And that can look different depending on you as a person and depending on what you're going through and depending on the day. Sometimes the compassionate thing is to just let yourself vent and rant and rave and be like, ah! Sometimes the compassionate thing is to say, okay, so we're feeling this way. Why are we feeling this way? If I did this instead, how would things be different? Would things be better? Would things be worse? What do we think would help us in this moment? But another compassionate thing, which I should do more of, is like bigging yourself up, of being like, yeah, you've got this. Like, things are bad now, but like, you are so strong and you are so brave and you've been through so much crap and like, you've got this. It doesn't feel like it right now, but you've got this and I'm here for you. Self. Bringing it back to acting and theatre, because that's what this channel is about. Going back to what I've just said about compassion. So for example, as an actor, we go through a lot of rejection. I know as people, we go through lots of other stuff that you can use this for, but keeping it at like theatre specific for the minute. So let's say you want to use your journal because you struggle with rejection, whether in general or you're just going through a hard time, maybe you've had lots of rejections in a row. Using your journal to go through that stuff, whether it's, I've had another rejection again, this industry sucks and I hate it. Or being like, okay, what feedback did I get from that audition? What do I think I could do to improve things for next time? What can I learn from this journey? Or to be like, fuck that panel. That panel doesn't know talent when they see it. You've got this, you're amazing. You've had so many jobs, you've had so many good reviews. You are amazing, and it's just the industry hasn't noticed it yet, but you're gonna get there and you're gonna show them, you know. Any way that you want to process that, you can do in something like this, where no one's gonna see, so you don't have to worry about sounding egotistical or sounding like a failure and like you're never gonna make it because your skin's not thick enough, or you know, sounding like you haven't got your shit together. It doesn't matter because it's in your journal and no one's going to read it. So you can do what you need to do to get yourself back on that horse. Also, if you prefer like processing things in a more long form way, using it to think about and like deepening your relationship with your craft, like especially if your relationship to your craft is changing, like I'm going through a change right now and I'm just giving myself journaling advice at this point. An example you could use is like, think of a show that really stayed with you or really moved you in a certain way. What was it about that show that did that? To really like get critical of like, okay, what do I love about my industry? So that as we're trying to navigate it, we can be like, yeah, these are the kind of things that set me on fire and they're the things that I care about. And so that's the kind of work I want to try and foster in my career, you know? That kind of like bigger stuff as well, you can also do in here and really kind of get deep on that shizzle. If you're more of a theatre fan, I don't know how this journaling would really help with the theatre side of things, but like it's always good to, you know, be happy with yourself and get to know yourself and know your thoughts and know your ideas and know your plans and your dreams. The other thing I will say, again, if you watched my previous video, you will know that I've been going through a hard time without the help of therapy. I've been leaning a lot more on this since I've come to terms with the fact that I have not been okay and I need a way to be okay. And especially when approached compassionately and through the use of things like journaling prompts or asking questions, this can be a really good kind of stopgap tool. If for whatever reason therapy isn't an option for you, whether that's waiting lists or whether that's price or whether that's just access. Mental health provisions can be a real postcode lottery. So learning how to engage with a tool like this compassionately is always helpful, I think. Not a mental health professional, so this is not mental health or health advice, but it's what I found anyway. Last thing I will say, some people just really don't like journaling. You can journal digitally, and I don't like typing, but if typing works better for you, you can do that. If talking to someone, whether that's a therapist, if you have access to one, or someone you just trust, because I think that's the other thing, it's about externaling your externaling. It's about externalizing your thoughts, right? That's the thing that can help. So if there's someone that you trust to talk to, or even just talking out loud, like I still do this. Like if I'm trying to figure out something in my brain, I will just talk to myself like a crazy person, and it's really helpful. If that feels too weird, like recording your thoughts so you can, or recording yourself talking through your thoughts so you can listen back to it later, or recording yourself on video. You don't have to post it anywhere, it's literally just for you, so you can look back at it later and be like, what was going on there? You know, those can all be ways to do it as well. And then I guess the last thing is, if you're worried that someone is going to find it, like if you're worried that if you write stuff down, people are gonna find it and read it, you don't have to keep you can just write what you need to write on a piece of paper and then destroy it, whether that's burning it, ripping it up, flushing it down the toilet. Maybe don't flush it down the toilet, but do you know what I mean? Like you can write down what you need to write down and then destroy it if that is a worry for you. But yeah, I find it really helpful. Then that's why I'm sharing it with you, because I'm finding it really helpful. That is number 2, regular 13-year-old kid in their room journaling, you know? Yeah. Number 3 is my Commonplace book. This is actually the newest form of journaling that I have implemented in my life, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I first heard of Commonplace books a few years ago, actually. I go through phases of watching different type of content. So the last time I was on a journaling content binge, Commonplace books came up and I was like, oh, that seems like a really interesting idea. Maybe I'd want to do that, but didn't. And then it came back around again when I was weirdly going through a journaling / philosophy phase on YouTube. And yeah, Commonplace books came up again and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So this is my Commonplace book. She's pretty, she's small, she's dainty, very demure, very elegant. By the time this goes up, that meme is probably well and truly past, but you know, it made me happy in the moment. If you don't know what a Commonplace book is, a Commonplace book is basically a repository for any quotes or observations that you have, and then for you to reflect on them. Most people use Commonplace books to write down quotes from books that they have read or are reading. And I'm also doing that. I'm currently reading the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If 20-year-old me could see me now reading a philosophy, basically diary from an old Roman emperor, I have also been writing down quotes from the Meditations. But I also, the thing that turned me on to, I actually do want to start a Commonplace book, is for writing down things that I see online, particularly on social media. If I see something that I find really meaningful or insightful online, I can write it down and then come back to it later because I know it's in there, and then I can reflect on it in a slower pace that is not on a platform or in a medium that is encouraging just like dopamine hits of just continuously scrolling and just like constant stimulation. I can stop and I can think about it later. The way I set up my Commonplace book is on a 2-page spread. One side will be quotes. So here we've got a Marcus Aurelius quote and we've got a quote from an Instagram. And then on the other side, I'll do the reflections, and they can be on different days. So like I write the date, and then I've just found that the size of the quote is the size of the space that I'm allowed to meditate on that quote. I don't know why, it's just pleasing to me, I guess, so I can easily see like this is a reflection on this. There are ways to be kind of more organized with Commonplace books. Some people have like an index, and so they'll have different sections of their notebook that will be on certain topics. Historically, that's what was often done. You'd have a section that was about religion, a section that was about like, I don't know, home economics. You'd have a section that was about whatever. Other people, they will just use their Commonplace book to write about one media at the time. So like if they're reading a book, they would only put quotes from that book in their Commonplace book, and then when they finish that book, they'd move on to the next one. I just decided to do a free-for-all, so I literally just write the date, and then whatever I'm wanting to write down in terms of a quote, that's what I write down. And then obviously reflect on that whenever I get a chance to, and again I'll write the date. I liked the idea firstly of making this as easy to start as possible, because I wanted to start it and I didn't want to make it complicated, so I was like, I'll just do things chronologically. If I want to write something down, I write the date and I write it down. It doesn't matter where it's from. And secondly, I kind of like the idea of being able to see chronologically, like at this time these were the things that were speaking to me and resonating with me, as like an overview, without having to worry about I'm just writing about this one thing. And I figured that if I didn't like that when I started it, I could either tweak it halfway through the book, or I could just finish this one and then in the next one, if I want to do an index and have different sections, then I can. This is one of the tools that I think helps me more as a general artist, as someone who works in the performing arts. And it can depend, but I feel like as an actor, there's more of an emphasis on the skills that we have, which I'm not knocking that. Obviously, as a performer, you need skills to be able to tell stories well, right? But I don't think a lot of emphasis is always put on what we value in terms of art and in terms of the world. Like, art is meant to reflect the world and the times. So I feel like even as performers, and it's not even as performers, as artists, we need to have an opinion on those things. And so having somewhere where you can write down your observations, what you observe that speaks to you, and then reflect on why those things spoke to you at that time. What is it about this quote that makes me think about myself, or makes me think about the world as a whole? Do you know what I mean? And I think firstly that can be really useful. I mean, I hypothesize. I haven't had this notebook long enough to know like the impact it's had on me, but I hypothesize that if you're someone who is inclined to making their own work, whether that's writing, choreography, composition, where you're more involved in the creative process than actors typically are, I've hypothesize that this is going to be just a huge bed of, you know, potential starting points for pieces of work that can explore the things that you find resonate with you through your Commonplace book. But I think even if you're just a performer, your artistic work is solely taking the words, the songs, the choreography of others and interpreting them in order to tell the story that that piece of work is meant to tell. I still think it's useful to think about what media speaks to you. This specific song lyric or this specific quote from a play, what do I think this says about me? What do I think this says about the world? What do I think it says about this character in this situation? What do I think this says about the human condition? What do I think this says about art? I think it's important, if we want to call ourselves artists, to think about those things. And I think a Commonplace book is a really good place to do that. And I'm really enjoying just the act of like noticing when something moves me or causes a reaction in me, and then being like, I'm gonna write that down. I really enjoy that. And you know, knowing that these quotes are here that I can come back to later without having to be like, oh, what was that book and that quote? And it was something like this, you know what I mean? I also am looking forward to hopefully there being a time when I can write more theatre-based quotes in here. I can imagine, you know, wanting to write down lyrics in this. And I think if you wanted to use this solely as a theatrical tool, if you're a theatre professional, or just really enjoy theatre, you could totally have a Commonplace book that is just for, you know, theatre quotes or theatre song lyrics. You could probably have a whole Commonplace book that's just devoted to Sondheim quotes, if you wanted to. So yeah, I think you could definitely narrow the scope of your Commonplace book to be more theatre-based. I like it being general because I'm also on a journey of self-rediscovery. So for me, I'm kind of like, I just want to write down anything and everything that I want to write down. But if you wanted to narrow that scope, you definitely could, I think. So yeah. Also, she's pretty. I love her. Look how green she is. Number 4 is a creative journal. And this is one of the journals that I actually want to get back into because I haven't kept a proper creative journal consistently for quite a while. Creative journals can be kind of as broad or as narrow as you want. So you can have just a general creative journal where just like anything goes. You can draw, you can write, you can paint, you can collage, whatever it is. Or you can go quite narrow and specific. So the last journal I had that I would call a creative journal is this one, which I would call more of a creative writing journal rather than a creative journal in general. This is the notebook where I worked through quite a lot of like writing courses. So I did a free Open University creative writing course and I did most of my exercises in this book. I worked through the Ode Less Traveled by Stephen Fry in this book. The creative journals I had previously, see the B-roll, were general creative writing journals. So they were plain paper notebooks and mostly I still wrote. I'm not a visual artist, but I would also doodle, I would also draw, you know, do different things in those creative notebooks. Those were also notebooks where I was working through kind of more creative courses, so just courses to connect with your general creativity as well. I have also in the past tried keeping art journals, so journals that are specifically for visual art, like drawing, painting, collage. So far, I haven't been great at keeping those. And I think that's just because, like I said, I'm not a visual artist. And that doesn't matter. You don't have to be good at art to keep an art journal by any means. But I think just because there was that extra layer of intimidation. And I think that's the issue that I've had a lot with my creative journals, whether they've been just general creative journals or writing journals or art journals, is trying to shake that feeling like that what you're doing in them needs to be good, rather than them being places for creative play and kind of self-expression in a way that no one's going to see it. Similarly to like just like a diary where you're writing your thoughts, they're private, no one's going to see them. So like you can write bad poetry, you can write bad short stories, you can draw bad drawings, you know. But I think in a society where we're told that anything we do needs to be good enough that it's, you know, to be worth it, you need to be good at it, right? Why are you playing the piano when you're not good? Why are you knitting things if they're not good enough for you to sell on Etsy? You know, that kind of stuff. It can be hard to overcome that kind of conditioning. So yeah, I think that's been my biggest block. But I do want to get back into it because in the past, when I have kept some kind of creative journal, it's made me feel more connected to my creativity, especially when I haven't been working. When you're in a show and you're acting, it can depend on how creative the team lets you be as a performer, but like you're doing your creative thing, right? When you're going through a dry spell, when it comes to performing and acting work, you can be I've found anyway, very disconnected from that creative part of yourself because you're not doing the thing. And also on the flip side, and it's one of the reasons that I got into crochet, for example. I started crocheting again for the first time in freaking forever. But as performers, we can feel like anything creative we do has to serve our acting career, if that makes sense. I mean, even with crochet, I have crochet on my CV because if there's ever a time when they need someone who can crochet, I can do it. Like, it's not so much about that, it's having something that isn't inherently performative. And I think a creative journal is the epitome of that, right? A creative journal isn't something you can put on your CV to be like, I can also creatively journal if you need that in your TV show or your film, or you need me to journal on stage. It's like, no. A creative journal is something that is completely only for you. And yes, you can choose for some of your creative hobbies to just be for you. Like, I could not put crochet on my CV and be like, I just crochet for myself. But I think like a journal by its very nature is only for you, and I think that's something that's very important to foster and I think is very powerful. Obviously, even when we're out of work, we can foster our creativity through, you know, learning new songs and practicing and things like that. But there's always that bit in the back of your mind of like, this is your profession, and so if things aren't going the way you want them to go, like, everything can get blocked up, whereas there's no way to creative journal badly. And I think that's why for my own creative recovery, I want to restart some kind of creative journaling practice. For me, I am looking for a plain notebook. You'll see from the B-roll my old creative journals, and that's the kind of journal I want to get back to. They're just literally brown paper covers, plain, basic notebooks. There's nothing fluffy, there's nothing fancy about them. And that's what I want, kind of similar to buying a spiral notebook for like my emotional journaling. I want something that it doesn't matter if it gets messy. If I buy a nice notebook, I'm not gonna wanna mess it up. I'm not gonna wanna put crap in there. Do you know what I mean? Not deliberately, like not deliberate crap, but like I'm not gonna wanna write a stupid, silly, bad haiku about ducks in a really nice notebook. I don't, like, that's an example. I don't know why I went with bad haikus about ducks. Or like write silly limericks, or like draw a really bad doodle of my garden because I just want to draw something that day. Like, do you know what I mean? Or just like get the most obnoxious like neon markers I have and just draw something really outrageous and childish and silly and goofy. I'm not gonna want to do that in a notebook that, this notebook, my Commonplace book, I wouldn't want to do that kind of stuff in this because it is so pretty, right? I need something that I can mess up and not worry about it. And those notebooks are weirdly hard to find in a way that's affordable. There's a really nice stationery shop by the Ambassadors Theatre in town, and they have some notebooks, but they're like £18 for like this size. And it's like, I don't have that kind of money. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Because then it can be a true creative notebook and I can do whatever I want in it. And again, kind of similar to the Commonplace book, I think as a performer, even if performing is the only creative profession you have, you're not interested in branching out into kind of other mediums. Again, like I said before, I think just fostering somewhere where you can creatively be yourself without the pressure of this needs to be good for my job can be very empowering. It's something that I would encourage everyone to try at least once. If you try it and it's not for you, then like fair enough. Like, I don't think every type of journaling is for everyone, and not everyone needs that kind of creative outlet and their creative space. They are perfectly fulfilled by, you know, their own practice, their own professional practice, I mean. But I think if you're someone who you feel that kind of creative block, especially if you feel like I do sometimes, that a lot of the time in this profession is about having to be what the profession wants you to be. You're the kind of person that when you go into an audition, it's not about you making a creative choice and portraying that character and the panel can take or leave it. That's their prerogative. For you, going into an audition is about, I have to be what the panel wants. Creating a creative space for yourself where you can be the creative person and make creative choices, I think is very, very important. And it's the reason that over this last few months, as I've been coming to terms with what I've been going through over this last year, I've been feeling more and more that like actually a creative journaling practice is gonna be good for me and it's important for me and it's something that I need to restart. And like I said, depending on you as a person, that can be a general creative journal, which is what I want to do. You could just have a creative writing journal. You could just have an art journal if you're an artist, or it might be in the form of a hobby, like a yarn craft or something like that, some other creative outlet that that isn't performing and is just for you and is a way to creatively express yourself. So yeah, that is number 4, creative journaling. The last journal I want to tell you guys about is number 5, which is my practice journal. This is definitely the ugliest journal of the 5 that I'm showing you. It's literally just like plastic spiral notebook. Also, this notebook is freaking old. I think this is the oldest notebook out of all of these. This is probably the second oldest. When did I start writing in this? 2021, yeah. This notebook has been with me since 2013, before I started drama school. Yeah, she's an old girl. If you haven't heard of a practice journal, that's probably because practice journals are kind of most common in the music scene, especially with classical musicians. And that's where I found the idea of practice journaling, was when I was learning clarinet. I started clarinet in primary school, but in secondary school, the last clarinet teacher I had was like, you need to get a practice journal. That's what we're gonna do. This journal is not from those days. This journal is my singing practice journal, but you can use it for anything, as we'll get on in a minute. I think practice journals can easily be adapted if you're a straight actor and you're practicing your acting craft, if you're a dancer, obviously if you play an instrument, but anything where you either have lessons or practice regularly, hopefully both to some extent, you can have a practice journal. And again, practice journaling as a tool, you can really adapt it to what you need. So in its most basic form, you write down what you practice. So for each practice session, you write down your goal of what you want to achieve in that session. If I was journaling for a session, I would write down what I did to warm up. If I was doing exercises for a particular vocal technique, what exercises I'm doing for that technique. If I'm practicing any pieces, writing down the name of the piece and what I'm practicing. Am I learning it? Am I going over a specific section that might be technically difficult? Am I just singing through if it's something that's already in my rep? I also have used this in the past for lessons. So especially when I was at RAM, it was only at RAM, because when I was at Southampton doing my music degree, we didn't really record our singing lessons. But at RAM, that was like strongly encouraged that you record your lessons. And every time I have a singing lesson, I record it on my phone. But I will still take my journal with me to my lesson, so I can either I can write things down contemporaneously. Yes, I can listen to it back, but for me, it's one of the reasons I love like analog things so much. Like that physical act of writing something down helps kind of solidify it in my brain. So if my teacher is like, you should check out this song, writing that down in my journal, in my practice journal, like just helps me retain that information. And secondly, if I've had a very, I'm going to use the word insightful lesson. So that could be a lesson that went really, really well, a lesson that was quite difficult and challenging, a lesson that brought up a lot of emotions for me for whatever reason. I might want to reflect on that lesson afterwards in this journal, like write down what my thoughts were. Those kind of untangible things that aren't going to come across listening back to it the next day, and I'm going to forget the intensity of whatever revelation that is, writing it down as like either contemporaneously or as soon after the fact, so I have a record of it, that kind of stuff. Other things that, just as examples, again, I've got B-roll, so it'll probably be clearer in the B-roll, but like one of the pages I've got in here, clearly either it's from a lesson or I was just doing this for myself. This would have been at RAM, because all of the songs were songs that I was learning at RAM, but I've got a title, what makes this song remarkable? And then for every single song that was in my rep at the time, I've written down what was remarkable about that song. It literally goes on for so many pages, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Well, 10 and a half pages of every single song that was in my rep. I know from having looked through it, there's examples of me writing down the context of songs, the given circumstances, what's happening in the song with a character, things like that. You can put text work in here, you can put like technique things in here, and then kind of on the kind of broadest sense of what a practice journal can be. You could also use your practice journal as the place where you write down more long-term goals. So what you want out of your career, what kind of shows you would want to be in, and then kind of narrow that down of like, okay, so if I want to be in this show, what songs do I have for that audition, or what monologues do I have for that audition that would be suitable? If you're in this profession long enough that your casting changes, which hopefully you would be, your casting age increases, or you have a huge body change or like other physical change, you lose a lot of weight, you gain a lot of weight, change up your hair, you change up the way you present in terms of your gender identity and your gender presentation, you know, things like that. Using your practice journal to be like, okay, how has my casting changed? How do I feel about that change? And then recognizing that change. Okay, so what in my rep, whether that's this, like your rep folder in terms of songs or in terms of monologues or in terms of styles of dance, I guess if you're a dancer, what do I have that still works for that? What gaps are now there that I need to fill for the kind of casting that I am, which then would feed into obviously what you're going to take to lessons, what you're going to practice. Practice journal can be used for any of and all of those things. Some of those things you might want to do more in one of the other journals I've mentioned, but you might want to do those in a dedicated notebook. What I will say about practice journals, at least in my experience, is I find them so much easier to keep when I'm having regular lessons, whether that's because I was at RAM in training, or even in Southampton. I'm pretty sure I kept I did keep a practice journal in Southampton. When I've been having regular lessons where I've had set things to work on for my course, or just I think when a teacher is setting you stuff to work on, you know, when you're having lessons and you've got that feedback from a teacher, you know, who can suggest rep for you to look at or give you pointers of things to practice in your own time to improve, it's a lot easier to keep a practice journal, because you have, like, in terms of the goal for your practice sessions, that's easy, because it's like, well, I need to learn this song, or I'm working on this technical thing right now. When you don't have that kind of external framework of like, here are things you should work on, or here's some stuff you should learn, and you're having to direct your own practice, it can be a lot harder, I've found, to keep a practice journal, because it feels like you're just kind of stumbling around being like, I guess I'm practicing this now. I think the way to overcome that is just be really clear on what your goals for practice in general, or each practice session specifically, really helps. So that's something that I've started implementing, even if the goal is just to have fun. There have been sessions recently where I've been like, I just want to have fun and I just want to sing, so that's what I'm gonna do, and any notes I make are based around, have I achieved the goal of having fun today? In terms of if you're wanting to start a practice journal, just everything I've said. Obviously that's been coming more from like a singing perspective. I've not really used a practice journal in terms of like straight acting, to be honest, but it's something that I would look into doing. I think I would just want to get on my singing practice first and get that to a point where it's habitual before expanding it. But in terms of if I was looking to do an acting practice journal, definitely looking at monologues. You could probably have practice journal for things like self-tape or like screen acting skill, in terms of like eye lines and things like that, setting yourself like assignments for that. In terms of classes, like any workshops or whatever, if you wanted to put those things in a practice journal instead of just like a general notebook, you could definitely do that. I've in the past just put those things in general notebooks, but yeah, if you wanted to have a dedicated practice journal for that kind of stuff, you definitely could. Any kind of technique, accent work, I think actually for straight acting, a practice journal would be great for like accent work, writing down notes for different types of accents, the hooks that get you into a particular accent, things to work on, etc. Resources for like good samples. I think those are probably the main things I would use for like an acting practice journal. For dance, I think because dance has a lot of, depending on the style of dancing, a lot of technical things, so definitely keeping a track of like what technically you're practicing, how it feels in your body, any kind of physical cues of like, okay, when I did this technique correctly, this is how it felt. Like the kind of stuff where if you were to film yourself, you wouldn't necessarily see what's happening if you were to watch it back. So like those physical sensations. Also noting down choreography if you are able to physically note down your choreography, if you have a system that works for you. I know there's like different choreography notations. I don't know if they're specific to different styles of dance and stuff, but like, or just like writing down the notes, especially maybe if you're being seen for things that you know, if you get seen for a show and you get quite far in the rounds but it doesn't go your way, if you get seen for that show again, you're gonna have to do the same choreography, so if you can note it down. And then just in general, again, goals, like what kind of work do you want to do practically? Do you have, like, where are the gaps in your repertoire for that kind of work, and how do you fill them? Like, what songs do you need to learn? What monologues do you need? What styles of dancing do you need to work on? That kind of stuff. And if you're not a theatre professional, I mean, if you sing, dance and act for fun, you can still keep a practice journal. You don't have to be a professional to make use of stuff like this and to want to improve your craft, even if you're an amateur. So you can definitely still keep something like this. If you're not a performer in any way, shape or form, then you probably don't need a practice journal. I guess the practice journal is a placeholder for any hobby that you have that you want to dedicate time to improving and tracking your progress. If you don't want to do that in something like a bullet journal, having a journal for that hobby is the way to go. So yeah, there you go. So those are the 5 journals that I have found the most helpful in my life as a actor, as a freelancer, as an artist, as a human being. Let me know if you use any of these kinds of journals or if any of them were new to you. I'd love to know your thoughts on journaling, whether you journal, how you journal, how useful you find it. And also if you're planning on potentially implementing any of these journals in your own life, whether you're a theatre professional, a theatre fan, or just a human who stumbled upon me on the internet, whichever one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. We'd love to have you on the channel. Stay tuned for more theatre content from a UK perspective, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye friends!